So computer processors have come a long way in the last 10 to 12 years. We've got like 16, 24 cores, we've got Threadrippers with like 96 cores. But do the old ones still hold up? In my hand, I hold a 12-year-old processor, 6 cores, 3.46 GHz as a base clock, 12MB L3 cache. It's an Intel Xeon X5690. And I'm curious if something this old can still hold up today. So I'm going to be chucking it in with a GTX 970 and 24 gigs of DDR3 RAM. Because these processors, as servers are getting outdated and updated, these server processors are going online really cheaply. This processor is only 40 AUD and this much USD. You can also find e-wasted motherboards online. So if this is any good, it might be a really good budget option for beginners. And let's chuck it on a test bench. And with that, we've got it all hooked up. The CPU is now under here with this Intel stock cooler on top, but it's pretty thick, so it should be fine. Triple channel, 24 gigs of RAM, DDR3. The CPU is going to limit it to 1333 MHz. An Asus Strix GTX 970 on an Asus X58 motherboard. Let's boot it up and get some testing done. Got it running. Not all of the memory's showing up, which is worrying. So I'm going to quickly troubleshoot that, and then we'll start it up. So after some troubleshooting, I was only able to get 16 gigs. Because quite literally my middle DIMM slot died as I started this. It was working before I set it up. But I don't think that dual channel 16 gigs will be a massive problem for this CPU. It's all working, 6 cores, 12 threads, 12MB L3 cache. I do have it hooked up with the GTX 970. Let's do a quick run of 3D Mark. TimeSpy is now running. And you might be asking why I'm running this on a GTX 970. Well, this CPU is not very expensive. It's very much a budget option. Same with DDR3 RAM and X58 motherboards, if you're buying one of the second-hand AliExpress ones, are really dirt cheap. So, I don't know if it'll be bottlenecked or not, but to give it something that's like more expensive, like for example an RTX or even a GTX 1660 or something like that, would just feel unfair to the rest of it. It's just an invalid test. It doesn't show it's a budget option if one of the main parts isn't budget. As I got this for 60 AUD dollars. So the CPU and RAM all up is 100 AUD or this much USD. Doing pretty well on the 3D Mark TimeSpy CPU test. And then with that, the graphics score is 3542 and the CPU score is 3193. So not a bottleneck. And that's not a bad score. And that's the total score. It's really not a bad score for TimeSpy, but let's try it in some actual games. We've got Minecraft running, which is a far more CPU intensive game, which is running at a very clean 60 FPS, but it's unlimited and the frame rate is capped because that's the refresh rate. It's on 10 render distance now, but if we turn it up to 15, if I start flying, it's still very much keeping up with it very well and dropping at most to like 45, and it only starts dropping frames if you're at like 32 render distance. An older game of a similar generation, like Portal 2, runs flawlessly. 24% utilization with 250 to 270 FPS, maxing out at 2,336. I've got Assassin's Creed Unity running here, which is running at about 50 to 60 FPS. I've just died, but admittedly still capped at 60 FPS, but is running pretty well. 82% utilization on the CPU, but Assassin's Creed Unity's got no issues. So this is Fortnite on medium settings, which is running at about 40 FPS, 30 as an average, but at the moment the GPU is the bottleneck, which I honestly didn't expect. So overall, it looks pretty good. It's kind of slow, its frame rate's a bit choppy, but this is also a newer game with some of the updates and stuff. And I'm sure if we drop down to low, then if you run it at low, which still looks pretty good, it's a very consistent 60 FPS. And I'd like to clarify, this is zero overclocking or anything like that. So this chip is very overclockable. It's definitely even on low graphics, so admittedly got some dips. But once again, the GPU in this system is the bottleneck. The priority I'm testing is the CPU, but I also didn't want to give it a massively powerful GPU, it would make sense. And with that, we've done some game testing, we've run some applications, and overall the CPU did pretty well. For a $40 CPU, that's pretty good for what it did. But there's still a few things with it you have to keep in mind. Like, for one, it is 12 years old. It's got an older architecture, it's just not optimized for modern day. In fact, I've had a few games just won't run with it. A few of the newer games. Also, the fact that it's running DDR3 and an X58 motherboard, there is little to no upgrade path from it. It's not even compatible with NVMe. So, final verdict, does this CPU hold up in 2023? Yes, if you're willing to accept a few things. It's only going to last you a year or two. This is a hold-off machine. This will last you a year or two for gaming, but not much more than that. It may require more maintenance than a standard machine and comes with more risks, and you will have to buy second-hand parts. But overall, it's not a bad machine. I don't know why I know that. This is my current PC. I got it maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago. And before I had this, I was running this. I have jumped to a Ryzen 5800X, 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and an RTX 3060. But before that, I was running this with 24 gigs of DDR3 and a GTX 1050 Ti. Admittedly though, I had this Chinese motherboard though. Which these are the exact ones I'm talking about. You can buy on AliExpress for cheap. But if you're willing to accept all that, this 12-year-old $40 CPU can game. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video or found it informational. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'm a smaller channel, so it would help out a ton. To catch whatever video YouTube recommends to you from my channel, click here. Or to watch a video where I build my new PC, click here. And comment recommendations for cheap parts that you've used in the past. Anyway, hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye!